Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the FB Live program. And I am Manish Samnani, and I run a center called Soch, along with my wife Malvika here in Gurgaon, very near Delhi in India. And I, along with my multidisciplinary team, are happy to bring to you this program in very close collaboration with Faith Bangladesh, who, in all respects, are just like the center we have here in India. So both Faith Bangladesh and Soch are working since many years to bring in the best of the interventions, to bring in early intervention, bring in a multidisciplinary kind of an input to all the children who would require developmental inputs for their overall holistic development. Both these organizations in India and Bangladesh are dedicated towards bringing in all kinds of advancements to the interventions that are possible for our young children or any children who come to us for intervention or for their functional difficulties. We are very happy to join hands and bring into you whatever best can be in terms of technology, in terms of people around the globe who can bring in their inputs, who can bring in those insights that can foster our own knowledge, our own interventions to the next level in terms of evidence and in terms of delivery. Having conversations have been held with Jane, who was a mental health counselor and a certified play therapist, with Stephen Shore, who was himself a person on the autism spectrum, who was also a professor in the special education in the Delphi University. And we are very happy to welcome Dr. Daniel LegOff. He is a neuropsychologist who has originated what is called as the Lego therapy. As you know, Lego has been used since many, many years by children, something that we all know by those small toys that join in together, probably called as bricks at some parts of the world, called as blocks in parts of India and Bangladesh, I'm sure. Of all those wonderful figurines, of all those wonderful figures that we get out of Lego, and who would have thought that this Lego can actually be used for our children with autism to bring in a lot of social competence, to bring in a lot of their advancement of self motivation that they always have within themselves, the motivation that they have for engaging with objects, with colorful toys, with Legos, with something that has symmetry, something that can be built into one into another, can actually be used for social interventions, can actually be used for building what is now called as social competence. And Dr. Daniel LegOff is one of those pioneer people who has worked for developing this intervention. He is one of those people who has originated this intervention and has been talking about it throughout the world. He has a book on this intervention. He has a manual on it, and he's the best person, I think, to talk about this intervention in even more detail. So I welcome you, Dr. Daniel, to this show, and it's fascinating to all of us to know how your interest in Lego and how your name Daniel LegOff are so aligned with each other. It's as if you were born to develop this intervention right from the inception. So having said that, I would like to know from you how did you think of developing an intervention? How did you get stuck on Legos as being as being having any connect to children with autism? What has been your journey before we also show the viewers a little small video that we have thought of showing to them to give them some idea about these interventions? For the viewers, I would like to tell them that they can put up their questions anytime. They can actually put up their questions in Bengali language. We have our people, our collaborators who will translate it for us. So you can put up in Bengali, you can put up in English, and you can put up at any point of time whatever your question might be. It could be about social motivation, it could be about social competence, it could be about Lego therapy. So Daniel, over to you, and please tell us how did this happen that you got an idea about Lego being used as intervention?
Thank you, Manish, and thanks for hosting me, both Soch and Faith Bangladesh. Um, this story has been told many times and I've spoken about and written about. Uh, I give all credit to the kids for steering me towards using Lego as a therapy tool. Uh, as you know, many years ago, when I was first starting out in private practice, I was based in Honolulu, and I had a large playroom um, where I would conduct therapy with kids and quite often have their families in to do some interaction, observation. Uh, and I had a number of different play stations depending on what the kids' interests were. And I wanted to try to get them motivated to engage in therapy and to engage with me. Um, and what I found over time was that most of the children who really had autistic disorders really weren't that interested in expressing themselves through various kinds of media like clay or painting or the sand tray or the water station. I mean, they would come and sometimes do kind of sensory play with water or sand, but if they were doing anything uh, more creative or structured, that seemed to be something that I could engage with them therapeutically, that might be useful. Uh, it was with Lego, and I had a corner where I just had a box of Lego, um, and they seemed to gravitate to that corner, and there seemed to be more of an interest there than anything else in the room. Um, and then there were two key observations I made. One was that when kids made something with Lego, they wanted to display it, which was unusual because autistic kids don't often have a theory of mind capacity to think that other people are going to come and see what they've drawn or what they've made, some creation of theirs. They don't often have that display uh, tendency that so many children have. And I think it is actually an important part of autistic pathology that they don't do that. The typical scenario, and it's actually in the ADOS test, is to see whether the child will initiate joint attention and then point to something, use a gesture of pointing to create joint attention. But the other interesting part of that aspect was the reverse side of it was when would children come in and they would see something on my bookshelf that had been created by another child, as opposed to seeing a painting or a clay sculpture or that there had been some other toys moved around. They didn't seem to notice that very much, but when they came in and saw that there was a Lego creation, they would ask me about it. And they wouldn't just ask about the Lego, they would ask about the kid. They would say, who made that? They were
Yeah.
curious to find out what was going on in the room when they weren't there. It was the first time that they showed an interest that other children were coming into the therapy room. Um, and then again, one time there were two kids who both came to my office and they were in the waiting room, overlapping as their parents were dealing with my receptionist. Something was happening in the waiting room, and the two boys saw each other and had both brought Lego with them to show me from home, and they sort of connected. And they immediately started talking about Lego and their interest in Lego, and they saw some common interests in each other, and they expressed that interest to their parents. It was the first time their parents had seen their boys being spontaneously sociable in that way and really sharing their interests and being curious about another child. And so the parents asked me, would I be willing to see them together? And one of the boys said when the other kid left, the other kid came up to me and he said, "Hey, Dr. Dan, I think that kid is from my planet." And he meant that he felt like he was from another planet. And I know Temple Grandin has actually commented on that, like doing like a anthropologist on Mars, that she's studying humans and trying to figure them out. So they feel alien from us in some way. So this is a very high functioning, intelligent kid who's expressing what it feels like to be autistic. And they recognize that in each other, that they're different, and somehow we haven't quite worked out what that difference is. And they became very motivated to connect with each other and to participate and share that interest. And so that's kind of where it started. And then since then, it's grown and grown. As you know, I started with just a couple boys, and then other kids got interested. They saw some of the product. They were like looking at us building Lego sets and putting creations together. Um, and then they wanted to participate, and so it quickly grew into a group of kids that would meet weekly, and then I had that another group and another group. Within months, I had like 7 groups a week running. And then it started to become a thing. People got curious, what is going on, and people noticed that these kids were getting better very quickly. And it took off very quickly. It was really surprising to me um, how fast. So I knew I was onto something, and then I had, then at that point I had to start collecting some data, just because I'm a scientist. I wanted to know, well, all right, what is it about this thing? What's going on between autism and Lego? And then I've sort of been exploring that ever since and trying to understand what did I find here? What did I discover? Why, and is Lego such a magical tool for working with kids with autism?
Yeah. So should we take a little while and look at a video to see that will give the viewers a little kind of a visualization of what are we talking about. But it was amazing to hear this story, uh, Daniel, because it's amazing how how kids have felt with the Lego. They probably have felt that they belong to the same planet, so it's pretty exciting to know that.
Yeah, when they
So
when
let
they
me,
when they come
yes,
into a room with full of Lego, and when they're first introduced, and if there's a group running and there's other boys in there or the girls and boys, building together, they immediately walk in and feel at home. And it's quite an unusual thing. Like, and the therapists that I've trained and worked with over the years all look at each other and get it that they belong there. They just walk in and go, "Oh, okay, yeah, I see what's going on here. There's a bunch of kids building Lego, and I belong here." So it's an unusual experience.
I hope my screen is there, is visible to you, Daniel.
Yes,
Okay, let's play.
that's a short animated film actually that was made by some of the trainees during the workshop. When I do the training, it culminates. It goes through levels of Lego play. The participants go through levels of Lego play, and at the end, the big challenge is to
Actually,
create scenery and sets, and they write a storyboard, and then they create a short animated film. And this was an example of one of those.
so this was all created by the kids.
No, this was created by the participants. The kids do much better films than this.
Oh, okay, okay,
These
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah,
these
yeah.
are a
I'm
bunch
sure,
of
I'm sure.
these are a bunch of amateur adults.
Yes, you're right. Let me play.
So this was a news item. Um, this goes back a while. I was doing this for a group in uh, Kuala Lumpur called Block Lab, and they're probably similar to your group.
Yes. So, uh, like you said, we actually had a group in India for the first time getting trained in Lego therapy. They did all the basic level of training. Of course, it was always planned to happen physically and face to face, but with the pandemic situation, Daniel and I came up with the idea to do it on online, and we intend to definitely bring in the advanced level of training. So we have our first question, Daniel. This is from Kavita George, who is saying that I first experienced how interesting Lego can be for a special child during my visit to Legoland in Toronto. Contrary to what I thought, I was amazed to see how excited my daughter was to see and play with Lego. I had limited my belief for my daughter regarding her playtime using Lego. So I'm sure this is more of a comment rather than a question. But what she as a professional, as a parent, realized, no, maybe before you, she realized in real time. She realized when she actually went to the Legoland to see the kind of responses she got from her own daughter, amazed her, and that solidified the base of what we are talking about, of the fact that Lego can do some magic that may not be possible by other media, or equally strong as Lego can be. Like you said, that Lego actually initiated a lot of sharing among children, which is so difficult for our children who are typically thought of as being engaged with themselves. They are not thought of somebody who would actually go and share their joys or share their creations with others. But I'm sure that you would have a lot of experience of seeing just the opposite, of seeing how the children were very interested to share. And also, like you said, the children were able to relate to other children because they would ask, who made that? Who is the
Right.
person behind this creation? Which means they could connect and relate to someone who is not in front of them, which is such a big achievement for even for children who are high functioning, even for children who are very much good in terms of their cognitive communication abilities, that in terms of social and relatedness to people, we always have felt that they are still struggling with the theory of mind. Like you said, they struggle with connecting to people. They connect so well with their, probably with their academics, they connect so well with the objects around them, but it's way difficult for them to still connect or relate to the people. In fact, a lot of time it is said that, these if these children are happy being around themselves, if these children are happy being within themselves, why are we even trying to make their relatedness, or maybe change their personalities? So having said that, Daniel, what do you think? There are some parents who think, what if my child is just not interested in relating, communicating, and socializing with other children? Why can't I, by the advocacy that we say, why can't I just let him be? Why is it so important to socialize? What would you
Right.
say about it?
Yeah, I actually have a difference of opinion with my own colleague Simon Baron Cohen on this topic. We go back and forth about it quite a bit, and I always point out the fact that Simon's not a clinician. He doesn't see patients. He just writes books. It's sitting in his office at Cambridge. Um, and for most parents, I think the reality of it is twofold. One, if you don't do anything, even if your child has mild autism, you're pretty much guaranteeing that your kid's never going to get a job, which may or may not be a big deal to you. If you're independently wealthy and you think that, oh, having a kid, living in your spare room and playing video games or doing whatever repetitive things they do is a good outcome. I think you also have to consider quality of life. I mean, all the things that we strive so hard to achieve and are so motivated to do have to do with social connection and contribution. Independence. I mean, people are very motivated to become more than just the cog in the machinery, to be valuable members of society and contribute. And I think I personally don't want autistic people not to contribute because they can. They're unique individuals who have often a very different way of looking at things. They have unique capacities. There's a group based out of Denmark, called Specialistturn. It is now a international organization that tries to find employers who will work with them and with autistic individuals to give jobs to people with autism. It's a terrific organization, but a lot of autistic kids have the capacity to develop their own social relationships as adults, including romantic relationships. These are kids that are going to go on and have their own families. And I've been in touch with kids who participated in Lego Club for longer periods of time, and a lot of them are now like on my Facebook, or they contact me on LinkedIn and things like that. And it's wonderful to hear that they really do have meaningful adult lives. There's a kind of a short-sighted view that some people have when you work with young children, that your goal is to get the kid from here to, say, capacity to function independently in third grade, or capacity to function independently at adolescence. And then they kind of like, they're like, oh, well, once they hit puberty, that's kind of like someone else's problem. Like they don't think about what life is going to be like. There's a long road after high school, right? There's college, and, you know, marital relationships, and fitting into a neighborhood and a community, and, keeping yourself employed. There's a lot of life. And you really need to arm people with the skills necessary to face that, and to have a meaningful contribution. A large part of what people don't realize, that happens automatically with most children, because we don't really study it that carefully, is the learning that happens outside of a classroom. Most children learn most of what they know independent of what we teach them in classroom, because they learn it automatically and spontaneously. We don't really give a lot of credit to it, but it's incredible how fast children pick up language, for instance, even multiple languages. Those of us who are bilingual realize that children can pick up multiple languages between the ages of 2 and 6. Or social functioning. How do we know? Like, I was watching someone the other day talking on the phone, and uh, I observe people a lot. And I saw someone walking down the street, young woman walking down the street. She's got the phone, and she's gesturing vigorously because she's upset about something. And I'm thinking, why is she gesturing like that, and using her face to express emotions? And she's talking on the phone, and she's in public, so other people can see her, and she doesn't really care that other people can see that she's, gesturing and talking on the phone. And in my mind, that's kind of silly, but it's so human. But we learn that it's a almost unconscious and instinctive part of how we interface with other people. If you don't use gestures to communicate, um, more than just what your words are indicating, then you're not a very effective communicator in most cultures. And cultures differ to the extent to which they use facial expressions and emotion and eye contact, but they all do it. And there may be some subtle differences in gestures. Like when I was living in Hawaii, I had to learn that lifting your eyebrows meant yes. Like, when, if, or hello, it's an acknowledgement. Like someone can say, "Hey, how are you?" And they would just respond. If you didn't catch that subtle gesture, you wouldn't know that they were. You would be like, "No, I just said hi to you. What are you being, a jerk? Come on, you didn't acknowledge me." And they, you didn't realize that that was all you were going to get. And and there they don't wave hi. They do the shaka. But so there are cultural differences, but it's always embedded in our culture. And typical kids pick that up. And what you don't notice so much, because it's not our job to notice, is that children learn most of what they know through play. My observations over many years of children with autism is that they don't play very well. They do a lot of repetitive things, which, if you think about it, is a real significant deficit. I mean, people think, oh, kids with autism don't play, but oh my goodness, they don't learn language, and they don't know how to interact with other people. That's much more important. And I have to tell them, how do you think most kids learn that stuff? They don't learn how to socialize at school. They don't learn how to be creative at school. and almost like stamp it out of them. You know, most people agree that the worst thing that happened to a creative kid is they get sent to school. So the kinds of things that we really value and that we really want to pass on to autistic kids are not things that we can really just teach them. I call it the cow says moo technology. What we teach kids in the United States often is like a lot of useless curriculum. And, you know, we teach them the capitals of cities in Europe. And, like, why? How is that important? Even early on, we have things like very important to learn, you know, that sheep go ba and cows say moo. I mean, it's different in different countries, you know. Chickens go, you know, cluck cluck, and ducks go quack. Like, why? Why are we teaching that? Do they need to know that? They live on a farm and they have to know, oh, that was a duck. You know, that was a cow. You know, like, but we still teach it because it's in the curriculum. It's like, okay, this week we're going to learn the names of the months. Like, with a kid with autism, does he need to know the names of the months? Is that really like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the days of the week? Like, but what we're not teaching them is how to interact with other kids. Oh, that, yeah, they'll get that on their own. Well, the reason we think they're going to get that on their own, or we think it's not important, is because most kids do learn it on their own. And so I think a key element of autism and how it affects development is this absence of spontaneous play. And part of what they're not demonstrating there is this almost instinctive or neurobiological relationship between positive outcomes and self-initiated creativity in a social context. Because what happens when most kids play is that they learn how to be social and they learn how to communicate. They play around with language, they
Yeah,
play around with
yeah, well,
physics,
yeah,
they play around with technology, they learn how to use it, you know, the laptop and the cell phone and everything by observing and then recreating those things in their own activities. But the other part of it is that they learn to innovate. And that's one of the most valuable things in society. If you think about how do you get past, you know, being stuck, you know, even for kids who can work for like groups like Specialist Firm, if they get a job somewhere in an engineering firm, say, how do you get out of your work peril? How do you get out of being just a cog in the wheel? It's by contributing something unique and doing something innovative or doing something creative. And you learn that capacity or develop that capacity through play. And when you show children the opportunity to do something that other kids are going to see as valuable, and other people will see your innovation or creativity is through something that you're particularly interested in. And so that to me, that was like a key aspect about Lego is it's something they care about, that's personal to them. They like it. You know, they understand it somehow. There's a system involved. They like the material, and it creates an opportunity for them to show off socially that they are innovative or that they have a skill. And that becomes kind of the core experience for them is, boy, doing this is fun by myself, but when I do it with my friends, it's a lot more meaningful. Uh, and so they don't just learn how to interact with each other and learn the basics of communication, but they also learn that they're a valuable, you know, they have a valuable contribution.
contribution. Yeah,
So, but it's not. I mean, it's Lego therapy. On the one hand, seems like very simple. It's a room with Lego, and the kids come in and they play together. That's the part we show the kids. To the kids, it's very user friendly. They just go, "Oh, okay, we got Legos, and we're gonna play with it." Um, Behind the scenes, there's a lot. I mean, we haven't really gotten into any of the details, but it's quite a technical kind of approach. You know, so behind the scenes, there's a lot of technology going on. And a lot of that has to do with how you structure the activities so that it requires them to interact with each other. Because just as I said with the two boys that I started with back in the late 1990s, I know that if I had not required them to interact in the initial group sessions I started with them, they would have done solo play. They would have been parallel play with Lego. They would have interacted with each other very much. It would have been too frustrating. Um, So what I did was I divided the task into interdependent components. And most people know, if they know anything about Lego therapy, they know there's like an engineer, a builder, and a parts supplier. And in building Lego sets, we give the instructions to one kid, we give the pieces to another, and then there's another third child who's doing the building. So the engineer tells the parts supplier what to give the builder to put together, and that's kind of the basis. We call it the triad, the basis for the core of Lego therapy. But quickly they evolve beyond putting sets together, and they start getting creative and making their own freestyle creations. And in doing that, I still require them to interact. And so they have to communicate their ideas about what they want to build. They have to communicate why it's a good idea. They have to engage other children in the task. And so you take on a lot of leadership and communication abilities in the process. Um, and then it evolves to what you saw earlier, which was Lego stop motion animation. And there's a lot of technology involved in putting Lego films together. But even more behind the scenes, there's a lot of social coaching. So the therapists are focused on the communication and social skills, while the kids are focused on achieving the Lego-based tasks, which are putting a set together, doing something creative, and then eventually doing something as creative as making a short animated film. So I see someone's asked the question, what is benefit of
Yeah,
Lego
yeah.
therapy for children with special needs?
I
Um,
think most of your answer was around that question from Farman Parvez. What is the benefit of
yeah.
Lego therapy for children with special needs? Yes, you can still summarize it once more.
Well, the good news is that from early on, we started collecting data. Um, One of the most important data sets I collected was probably getting to Vineland, which is an adaptive functioning scale. So we saw significant improvements. Now, one of the things, when I go back and look at the early studies many years later, I realized those gains were made very quickly. We're talking about 3 to 6 months of therapy, once a week therapy. When I look at colleagues who do, intensive Lovacian style discrete trial training interventions, and I've supervised and been involved in a lot of that, center-based as well as home-based programming for kids with autism. That's 40 hours a week, and it's very expensive therapy. It isn't just the therapists that are involved. You got their supervisors and their supervisors. It's sort of kind of a pyramid effect of technology and the designing of it. So you need someone with a ABA background, and it's very intensive. And what I've found over the years is that type of therapy has almost no impact on social functioning. Those kids will have years and years and years of therapy in a Lavoisian style discrete trial training approach. Um, and they don't even include social functioning. It's very rare. And if they do, it's highly adult directed. That's one of the problems I've had trying to get behavior analysts to do Lego therapy. And I have had some success, but they have to like take off their behavior analyst hat when they come in the room, because behavior analysis is based on this Skinnerian approach, which is it assumes that behavior is under external control, that there's no internal processing, because D.F. Skinner didn't believe in that. He didn't think it was useful to think about behavior being internally directed, directed by your own brain and your own thought process. He didn't believe in that. And I don't know if he was joking or what, but a lot of people believe him at face value, that it's not relevant to know what goes on in the brain. And to me, that these days, that's just silly. So I think people are beginning to realize that what we need to do is change the kid, not just their response to our behavior. And I always tell therapists, if your behavior plan doesn't start with how do you change the kid, then inevitably you're going to wind up with a kid who's just dependent on you to tell them what to do, or show them what to do, or structure their environment in such a way to tell them what to do. There's no internalization, no change of them personally. Whereas one of the first things I observed with Lego therapy was that these kids wanted to be different themselves. Suddenly they were confronted with a situation where they really wanted to become social. Uh, and that's the magic of it, is you've suddenly got a kid who's telling you, I want to be more social. I want to learn how to interact with people better. And that personal motivation is worth years of behavior therapy. Because in behavior therapy, you're always controlling the kid's behavior. They're not motivated at all. You're using some secondary motivation, but they don't internalize it. You know, you're rewarding them for doing what looks normal. I call it painting the grass green. Like you can get a nice lawn if you just go out and use like iron oxide. You can paint a grass green using iron oxide spray, but the grass is still dead. It's not going to grow. And so I think the same thing with children. Like you really need to look at how do you change them, not just how they look behaviorally.
Sure, that was great, Daniel, and I'm sure in terms of benefits for children with special needs, what I can understand from your description is that the most basic of cognitive abilities like play skills, and I being occupational therapist cannot emphasize less on play skills as the key component. And we have started talking about play skills in our discussions when we are doing sensory integration kind of programs and training programs, when we are doing programs especially kind of a certification on autism. We have started talking about play skills a lot, and there has been some change with parents not just taking play skills as for granted, as something that children will anyhow do it, but to actually focus on it as an area of an outcome. So even with the lego therapy, what I can understand is the the play therapy on play skills as on one side of the gain, the most basic cognitive construct of play that can be improved by play skills is on one side. On the other side, like you said, is a good amount of a scope or a potential to develop lego along with technology to go to a highest level of vocational and outcome, highest level of an outcome where it can go to being a somebody who produces a movie on it, could be envisaged with the lego intervention. So I can see there's a huge spectrum of gains for special needs children that can be brought about, and we are happy to kind of launch or be pioneer to bring in this interventions. Soch and Faith Bangladesh, we would be doing more and more interactions with you, like we have been doing since few months now, to really bring in this concept to the two countries, because we haven't seen much of its usage still here. We do a lot of belief. There's a lot of belief on social skills for sure. It's not that parents are taking social skills for granted. I'm very sure, and I'm sure the most important area that they associate themselves with the social skills is the inclusion. Is that the
Mhm.
child does not get included with other children in the classroom, and they have so many teachers and school professionals actually complaining about children, actually complaining about those children who need so much of individual attention, who are not so they are not. I'm sure the teachers and educators are not worried about educational outcomes. I'm sure if they have a child who does not interact with anyone, also, or maybe he does not know a knowledge about academics, is a problem for them. But what happens in the classrooms in India, and I'm sure about the neighboring countries, is if the moment that the child is not very social with other children, the moment that the child will have some acting out behaviors because he feels he's a misfit, or because the other children feel that he's misfit, is the root cause is definitely social skills somewhere, which is still very well appreciated by the parents. And hence I'm sure it's the social skills are very much there as an important level among parents of this community in India and Bangladesh and any other neighboring countries in Asia. But I'm sure they still may not have the tools that they might feel as something that they can use themselves, or they can at least advocate being used in therapy centers. In all over these countries, actually parents are have become very important to make sure that the professionals, the community at large gets more and more aware. It's the parents advocacy that has made the change, that has made people go for professional development programs, even just because the parents are actually looking for more and more input. They are the ones who have brought about the change in the community in terms of making not just accepting whatever is there, but to also take inputs from wherever for their own children. So social skills are very much there, I'm sure. Having said that, we have a next question from Shreya Bhardwaj, who's asking about can lego be actually be used for reducing social anxiety in children? can it actually
Mhm.
bring about a sense of the psychological aspect of not being anxious, because a lot of children might be capable of doing socialization, but mostly or a lot of times we see that they are just anxious about the anticipation of other people around them.
Yeah, social anxiety is one of the other diagnostic groups that does really well in Lego therapy. In fact, I think kids with social anxiety are probably the easiest population to deal with, and most helped by Lego-based therapy. Part of the reason for that is that there isn't a strong expectation about performance in areas that are not, uh, that they're not comfortable with. Quite often, very socially anxious kids may need some time to be introduced to the Lego idea by a therapist prior to being thrown into a group setting. I've worked with kids with social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety, panic attacks, and selective mutism. All do very well in this type of group. Um, what you need to assure them of is one, that the activity is going to be focused on the Lego, not on them. And then the other thing is that the kids in the room are all similar to them. They're inhibited, socially awkward, uh, you know, quiet for the most part, because we don't put kids with acting out behavior problems in Lego Club for that reason. It tends not to be a good mix. And I have some colleagues who think they can, and I have seen Lego Club used for kids with more behavioral problems or social development issues that are due to their upbringing and not necessarily due to a neurodevelopmental problem or an anxiety disorder. So that population may be, worth working using Lego, but it's they need to have their own group. You can't have acting out kids in Lego Club. Um, I mean, occasionally things come up. There's some behavioral issues that once in a while deal with, but mostly it's a peer mediated approach, uh, and so the children um, learn to regulate each other's behavior, and so you're not getting a lot of direct feedback from the therapist about your behavior in the room, following rules or doing appropriate actions, participating in the activity. It's the other kids. So the basic process of the therapy is to join an activity with other kids, and the feedback about how you're doing in that situation comes from the other children, and they have issues that are similar to yours. So this peer-mediated approach, I think, is very critical because you can see how that model could work in a classroom. Um, Certainly, just as in Lego Club, you have to pick the right kids. You can't take kids that are going to be overly assertive or communicate too quickly or be kind of impatient or bossy in a in an inappropriate way, and use them as peer mentors in a classroom. But you can find kids that are patient, supportive, encouraging, and use them in a classroom in the same way that we do in Lego Club. And so kids who are socially anxious really find that it's a safe environment, and they have some success. So it improves their self-efficacy. So they feel as though this is an island of efficacy for them. This is a place where they can come and show off something that they can do. I think it's important to make a distinction. Manish, you were talking about skills, social skills. And I often make a distinction between social skills and social ability. Abilities and skills are somewhat different because abilities are things you're typically born with and that evolve over time, based on your genetic inheritance. And skills are things you acquire through learning.
Yeah.
Most kids don't have social skills. In fact, we find people with social skills kind of off-putting because most of them are either politicians or salesmen or psychopaths. They're people that want to manipulate us. Those are skilled people when it comes to social functioning. We don't like people like that. And so what I talk about a lot is social abilities. But for our kids, so for instance, for most children, typically developing children, play is also an ability. We don't teach them how to play. We don't need to. But for kids who don't naturally play, then they do acquire it like a skill. See, this is the trick. I mean, they don't necessarily have that as an ability, so we have to teach it to them as a skill. And then it becomes internalized. If they're motivated, then it becomes an ability. So I think when we do something that's natural, like using facial expressions and body language and empathy, for instance, in most children is an ability. They're born with it. There's obviously large variability across people, but for typical kids, empathy, play, and social functioning are all abilities. And those are areas that children with autism don't necessarily have much of those abilities. It's a disability. And so we have to address it through the skill acquisition process. And then Sabrina is asking the relationship between Lego and cognitive development. It is a sequence thing, and in fact, most people not very familiar with Lego don't realize how much research goes into the product. Lego Corp is incredibly sophisticated about product development. Just mind blowing amounts of research go into it. I mean, they have collaborators from universities all around the world, very high level people, well known in their fields of child development, who study and provide input to Lego Corp. And I'm not trying to sell you on Lego as a product. I have no affiliation with them at all. I still pay retail for Lego. Like I have no connection with Lego at all. But if you learn more about the company, you will become a fan. They are incredibly sophisticated about how they develop their products, and they target certain developmental levels based on what they know about cognitive development in children, and quite a sophisticated approach. It's somewhat Piagetian, but they also have an acknowledgement about like how children play and how they interface with certain types of materials and what keeps them motivated. Certainly learning sequentially as well as with regards to holistic problem solving and reasoning. Those are all issues that Lego addresses. And one of the important parts of what they do is that it's not language based. So much of learning in education requires primarily, what we call left hemisphere functions, which are sequential, linear, and language based. And Lego isn't necessarily like that. So it appeals, I think, to a large extent to children with autistic conditions because many of them think in pictures. In fact, there's another Temple Grandin book. She wrote a book called
Yeah.
Thinking in Pictures. And so I think we understand how autistic people think by looking at Lego. Like it's almost a perfect example of how people in engineering, people in math, people with musical ability, they think differently and creatively in a slightly different way. But children who join Lego Club start with very straightforward tasks, and there's levels to Lego Club, and it starts with what we call the Lego helper tasks, which are things like finding pieces, connecting bricks, doing very simple, repetitive things that most children is within their grasp in terms of their abilities and skill levels. And then they graduate up, and the tasks become more complex as they acquire more proficiency with the method. But children, when they gain levels, so they go from being a Lego helper, becoming a Lego builder. In the Lego builder, the tasks are the three main areas of what we call the engineering, which is looking at instructions, the building, which is putting bricks together, and then the part supplying, which is finding the correct pieces and identifying the pieces and actually being able to label them and understand and communicate with other people about what are the Lego pieces. It really gets a very language-based component of it. But when they graduate up from Lego Builder, they go on to what's called the Lego Creator task, which is coming up with your own ideas, understanding how the Lego system is engineered, and then being able to innovate and become creative in the process so you can make your own Lego creations. And after Lego Creator, we focus a lot on the social and communication skills. So the next step up from being a Lego creator is becoming a Lego master. And a Lego master, the kids are very motivated to become a Lego master. But being a Lego master really means that you have some leadership abilities. You have to organize and run a group of your own. And then eventually, from being a Lego master, the next level up is something we call Lego genius. Lego geniuses are kids who can uh, create film. And that's when you write a script and you do a storyboard and you have to basically direct a short animated film using your collaborators, your friends. So those, it's a very stepwise progression with tasks that go from being, sort of motor to motor plus communication to focusing on communication plus social, and then social plus leadership and creativity, kind of in that sequence. And the amount of creativity increases, the amount of social communication increases, and the amount of responsibility and leadership increases over time. And That's kind of like the process that involves cognitive development. It's a very good question. And there's a fair amount of research on that. In fact, there's a large study right now going on in England. It's three different universities have collaborated together to do a multi-site replication study. But there have been other research studies, and of course, Lego Corp and the Lego Foundation are also involved in trying to understand how Lego therapy works and why it works. I mean, I think I established that it worked when I first started it over 20 years ago, and now everybody's wondering like, why does it work so well? Like, what's the deal? That's kind of where we're at. It's trying to understand child cognitive development by kind of dismantling Lego therapy and trying to understand like what's going on here. Why is this a part of cognitive development?
Sure. So that was great understanding about social ability and social skills, Daniel. And I would like to also share with all the viewers that Daniel also has a training program that he is planning to bring online. And this program is around 4 days in duration. It's an advanced level Lego therapy certification, after which you can actually start your own Lego club. And like Daniel says, it's not a therapy. It is Lego is not a therapy. Lego is more of a social ability enhancement program, and hence we call it the Lego club. And having said that, Daniel, uh, parent Kavita George would also like to know if you had experience of using Lego therapy with other diagnoses other than autism, and did you think it will work equally well? In fact, she believes that it can actually work well with her daughter who has cerebral palsy. But what have you have had any kind of an experience of working or using Lego therapy with other children other than the autism spectrum?
Yes, and kids with developmental and motor problems is one of the largest groups. I've had a number of kids with CP and micros who did really well. I actually ran a group, or I set up a Lego-based therapy group many years ago at a children's hospital for kids with neurodevelopmental disorders and other neuromuscular and even degenerative disorders in Ohio. And they were worried that the kids were hospitalized for periods of time for procedures, and they were isolated from other children for a long period of time. And so they wanted something that would help them stay um, at age level socially while they were isolated from other children due to medical problems. And so we started a Lego club at the Hattie Larland Center in Ohio. And the outcome was really good. The children who don't necessarily have autism but have other neurodevelopmental disorders tended to do very well. I've had kids with all kinds of neuromuscular, neurodevelopmental, and congenital or genetic disorders participate. And as I said before, really the only population that I feel needs to have their own groups are kids who are more oppositional, disruptive, conduct disorder kind of kids. Not because I don't think it can help them, but because those kinds of kids are not good in with the others, like with autistic kids or kids that are socially anxious, because they tend to dominate the groups and they bully the kids and they steal the Lego. So there's a lot of uh, specific types of behavioral things that need to be put in place before you deal with a bunch of kids who have social problems, that are behavioral, as opposed to developmentally disabled kids.
Sure. So, Daniel, I'm sure the viewers would have had a lot of wonderful ideas from your talk, and I would also like to share tomorrow we are again having a FB Live program, same time, and this would be with Ali Golding, who is a movement therapist, and she would be talking about how movement is important, what movement can achieve, especially during this pandemic. So hope to see all of you again tomorrow at same time, talking with Ali Golding, and would know a little bit more about how movement can be useful. Uh, Thank you once again, Daniel. It was wonderful meeting you once again, and we hope to see you for an extended period of time, maybe for few number of days, for achieving our goal of or bringing in the advanced certification program to India and to Bangladesh, to any other neighboring countries, because we definitely want some professionals really taking up Lego as the part of their as a part of their treatment program, as a part of their uh, help to the children. But I'm sure the concept is clear to all of us. We are very excited about the concept, in fact, but we still would need a little hands-on training to make sure that we are able to do and achieve what Lego therapy intends to achieve. And I know I have details from you about how the training can be a basic level training. It can also be an advanced level program. But like you have told us that it's the advanced level training that will bring about the hands-on aspect, or that will bring about the practical aspect of using Lego with children. So having said that, the entire team from Soch, me and my wife Malvika, and the entire team of Faith Bangladesh, Mr. Rafikul, the manager, technical training unit, Mr. Aftabuddin. He has already sent in his comments as congratulations, and also he finds this topic very interesting. He's the head of the technical training unit at a very big public health organization called ICDDR, and Madam Nilofer Appa, who is the head at the Faith Bangladesh. I would like to extend my thanks on behalf of all of us here in India and Bangladesh, and hope to see you one more time very soon. Thank you, everyone, and thank you,
Great.
Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Manish.